guys, welcome back to our channel, Monkey and the Monster. I'm Monkey, as you probably know. Today we're starting a new series, and this is going to be our Teen Wolf recap review show. Today I'm going to be working on season 5B, episodes 11, 12, 13, and 14. This is a crazy show, no doubt about it. It's probably up there for me with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We also have a recap show to that. I'll put a link in the description for that in case you're interested. We're going to be just going to jump right in, tell you a little bit of my thoughts. I'll talk a little bit about each episode, and then I'll give you maybe a little what I think might be happening, or just a little bit of my thoughts and what I felt about it. So without further ado, I get my notes because I take notes. Just want to talk about so far these first 4 episodes, and personally I really like them. I'm like crazy for this show. Been watching it for quite some time and really like it a lot. Very, very good. Season 5B, episode 11 was called The Last Chimera. And we start the episode out, we're seeing Lydia in the water, and I believe Dr. Velik is talking with her. And he has her kind of like, I don't know, like in a trance in a state, I'm going to say. I think it's like a trance. That's what I'm thinking. And he's prompting her and trying to get her to remember what happened. Because as in season 5A, we start out and we see her in Icon House, and we see her, she's trying to get out, and she's trying to warn the pack that they're all going to die. And this season starts off again, she's in Icon House, but this time she's remembering back to what happened, and we're going back to like where that night, where, what did they call it? I'm not sure what they called it. I think it was like the double moon or something like that. You know, let me know in the description, but that's where we start off. So pretty much she's going and telling us what happened that night where we left off in 5A, and she's like telling him like she's seeing Theo, and she's walking in this water, looks like that where that bridge was at. And we got a little touch of that last season, or last half season, but now we got to see what he was doing, and we see him letting his sister die basically so that he could have her heart. We later find out that it's because he wanted to become a genetic chimera, and he wasn't originally, so he needed like her heart. I like this quote right here. It's Dr. Velik, and he says, Theo was the first step in the right direction for the Dread Doctors. It all starts with Theo. And as we know, Theo's excuse me, Theo's out doing wreaking some crazy havoc on everybody. From that scene we cut to Sheriff Stalinsky, and we see he's dying. We also see early on in this episode Scott is not healing from Theo. I'm going to say his name so much I can't remember. He's not healing from Theo's attack and from dying and stuff. He still has a gash on his chest or stomach area, and it's not going away. We also see that Parrish finds Lydia. He goes, this is like she's remembering back, I believe, and this is like where Lydia, kind of her process into getting into Icon House, and we see that he finds her kind of hypothermic, and she's not responding, and she was missing in the last episode. Nobody can find Lydia, so now we see that he found her, and she has like her nails all scratched and cut up. Then we cut to the big scene with Scott and Styles and fighting, and Scott being blamed for not knowing or not being able to help with Styles' dad, and Styles is blaming Scott for it because initially, in my opinion, I feel Scott is a little bit to blame. I know a lot of people out there feel like, what are you talking about? But I think personally that, you know, Scott was way too willing to trust Theo, and he didn't trust his best friend, and he jumped to so much conclusions that everything that led up to it, I kind of feel in part it was a lot Scott's fault, but I don't know. I'd like to know what you guys think. If you guys have any thoughts on it, I'm interested. A big part of this episode, I feel, and I think a lot of you would agree, was when Scott and Styles and Malia, they searched for a chimera by the name of Noah, and Noah's running from the Dread Doctors, I think, and because he's having that mercury stuff and it's starting to come out of him, and they're looking for him because they feel that maybe he has something to do, or he is the reason why Styles' dad's not healing. Then they find Noah, and Styles agrees to take Noah, and he and Noah leave so that they can try to figure out a way to heal Styles' dad. And then Styles notices that one of those bones that are sticking out of Noah's hands, because he's like one of those berserkers. One of those bones is sticking out, and he sees that has like a shard missing. So they kind of figure out that that Sheriff Stilinski is poisoned by the bone marrow. And of course, they tell Scott's mom, and they figure that out. So after Malia and Scott are left alone, and Scott initially leaves and stuff, we see the Dread Doctors coming, and Scott is like prepare to fight, and Malia's like, we're gonna die down here, and he's like, no, we're not. She's like, how could you be so sure? He's like, you're not the only one I called. My mind went crazy. I'm not kidding. My favorite character, let me tell you a little bit about me. My favorite character in this show is Chris Argent, hands down. I think the creators of the show got it so right with Chris Argent. I cannot say enough about how much I like him, I'm gonna be honest here. But that part like freaked me out. And then like when he says, you're not the only one I called, and then we see Chris, he's like, get down, and he has like that gun and he starts shooting, and initially they get to leave, but hands down, that was the greatest thing to me. So now we see in the end of this episode that the Dread Doctors are still an issue. Scott's still trying to figure things out. He's trying to get his pack together, and they're trying to move on with this, move forward and try to figure things out. But we also see a little bit of the pack reuniting, because we're seeing that Scott and Styles, they may not want to, but they worked a little bit together. And Malia's back in there with them. I think that's hopeful for me. I believe that's hopeful for Styles and Malia, because that's my one true pairing, OTP right there. I know a lot of you people out there will probably hate me saying that, but I love it. And then at the end of the episode, we see Theo and Hayden, and I believe they're looking for Noah in the tunnels. And then they look, and then like they see inside the tunnel like the scratched out circle within like that little loop circle thing, and that's Scott's pack symbol. And this is basically a promise that Scott's going to reunite the pack. And I thought personally I liked it. So now we're going to move on to 5B episode 12. I'm going to butcher this, trying to say the name of the title. It's Damnatio Memoriae. I'm not sure if that's right. If it's not, okay, you can let me know. I don't think it's right, but I could be right. We start this episode out. We see Hayden and her sister. The sister's called to check on something at the communication tower. She goes. She finds a guy there. He's dying on the floor. Negligent, I think she might be a little bit, because she didn't stop and like phone somebody at the station, be like, hey, there's a guy dead right here, dying. She just kind of goes on. She sees the beast, or the shadow of the beast, Gévaudan, I believe that's how you pronounce it, and he seems to get away. And we see that he chases Liam and Hayden, and I believe the beast is caught on tape there. And Parrish and Scott, in the next scene, Parrish and Scott, they see it, and they're looking at it, and Scott and Parrish are like, you know what that is, right? And they're like, yeah, the last chimera. Then we go a little forward, and we see Styles and his dad. Now, I like this part a lot, because Styles finds his dad. They're still in the hospital. He finds his dad in the morgue, looking at Donovan's body. But what I liked about that episode is that it showed a lot of what Styles was going through and how he feels about everything that's happened and his feelings on Donovan dying, and he was talking about his worries, like how can you get over it, and his dad was telling him like you don't get over something like that and you'll always feel it, and I'm paraphrasing here, these aren't exact words, but and he tells him something like, you know, by forgiving yourself you get a little bit of you get a little bit back, and I don't know, I really like this part. And he was talking, Sheriff Stilinski starts talking about finding a counterbalance, right? And all this stuff about what he was talking about counterbalance, I felt reminded me, I believe, of season 5A, the first episode in the beginning, where Styles and Scott are looking at, or they're like waiting, and they're gonna do that senior signing thing in the library, but they're talking about how things were so good for a while, and then, you know, it's like things were bad and things could be really good, but then there has to be like a counterbalance. And I think that's maybe like a little nod towards that episode, maybe, maybe not, but that's what I'm thinking. An important part of this episode, and I think was, excuse me, Scott and Malia, and they're talking about, well, basically Scott goes to Malia's house and he asks her for help, and she rejects him, flat out rejections, and he's like, well, I could use your help or whatever, and she's like, you're not gonna like what I'm gonna do, I can't help you and all that, and like you see Scott and he like, okay, well, I think he just kind of, he senses what's going on, so he like decides, okay, well, I'm gonna leave then. And then we see, right after that scene, Malia closes the door, and then there's Brayden sitting, or like holding some guy down, and excuse me, they're like holding him down for information or whatever, and they end up finding, we find out that this guy was like he was like a Soviet special forces guy, and he has information on the Desert Wolf, which they obviously bribed him with $10,000 for his information. So he was quite quick to give them what they wanted. And he also mentioned something about animal doctor or something like that, which leads us to know that the Desert Wolf still had or has Dee, and she's still holding him hostage. A little more into this episode, we see Lydia and Meredith. Okay, so Lydia has this outer body experience in a way. She, like, her body is literally laying on her bed, and she's in Icon House. She comes outside of her body, and she's looking at her body, but she goes and she walks around, and then Meredith comes out of like a bathtub of like sludge and slime, and I don't know what is in that thing, but she comes out of there, right? And then they start talking about being a banshee and stuff, and then she's like, Meredith tells Lydia that she has to wake up in order for her to help her friends because things are getting bad, and Lydia hasn't woken up yet, and she tells her that she has to fight and she has to learn how to use her voice as a weapon. I thought that was really interesting because in the past we've heard like Lydia scream, and we've thought like so far that just means like there's like somebody's gonna die, but this new approach is pretty interesting because they're gonna make her use her voice as a kind of weapon. So I thought that was interesting. We go back and then it's in the tunnels, and Scott and Styles are in there, and then we see Theo's pack go after Scott. One of them is part Kanema, so paralyzes Styles, and Styles is knocked down on the floor. And then, obviously, the pack can't get the best of an alpha, a true alpha. We find out in the tunnels that the name, I'm going to pronounce this, try again, Damnatio Memoriae means a condemnation of memory. It's like a condemned memory in a sense. and it's like they're gonna, we obviously find out Theo and all of them are trying, the Dreads are trying to resurrect an old creature. And after that, we see Chris Argent, and he's taking his plant, and he goes and gives it to Gerard. Gerard, who's in his retirement home, coughing up nasty stuff that's laying on like all the floor and stuff. Personally, it grosses me out. But he gives Gerard the plant, and Gerard eats the plant, like, you know, and then he spits out, and he spits out like fresh blood. It's not like the black goop he's been like spitting out. As I'm saying this, a thought just clicked in my head. I wonder if the black goop that Gerard is spitting out is anything like that black goop that Meredith came out of in the tub. I don't know. I'd like to know your thoughts on that. Let me know. But we find out that Gerard knows about the beast, and he knows that it's true, what its true nature is, and that it's intended to kill, and that's its only objective, and that's what it's gonna do, is it's just gonna kill. And he also says that there's a connection to their family, and Chris points out a name, Labette. Now, for those of you who do not know this, I believe Crystal Reed is coming back to Teen Wolf. Now, she's not going to be Allison again, but she's going to be playing, I believe they said, the Lady of Gévaudan. And I think, like, that name would be Labette. I think that's where they're going to play into that, like, their history or their past, I don't know what I'm saying, past. I don't know. I'm really interested to see what that means. And we see, towards the end of this episode, Scott and Stiles, and they're still in the tunnels because they can't obviously leave the tunnels, but we see that Scott makes the circle, and then Stiles reluctantly makes the outer circle, and then that's like a symbol, like the symbol of the pack. So that's like Stiles is basically saying, alright, well, I'm back in. And then my favorite part of this episode is when they're leaving and stuff, and he's like, I still don't like that tattoo. And then they start laughing. It's like, I know you don't. So next episode was 5B, episode 13, and that was called Code Dominance. And we start out immediately with the Skinwalkers, and Kara goes and she fights them. They obviously get the best of her and they beat her. They tell her about, I guess Kara's there, we find out, to get help with trying to control the fox spirit, the kitsune, and we learned that if they can't help her and Kara doesn't pass her test, that she would have to stay there as a skinwalker with them. We find out that according to the skinwalker, she's afraid to use her sword. We find out a little more about the test that she's going to have to do. And we find out that her training there may take months or even years, which obviously really upsets Kara. I mean, who wouldn't be upset about that? I would be upset. And we find out that the kitsune may consume her if she can't get control over it. That it's going to take over her being, which obviously isn't good, because in the past we've seen Kara not have control over the kitsune spirit. And but what's crazy is that her mom is kind of on board with this. She's like, okay, well, if you don't pass this test, at least the skinwalkers can keep you alive. And Kara's like, what did you just say? I personally was like, wow, you're gonna let your daughter stay there. Pretty messed up. But we'll go back to Kara. So we go to another scene. We see Scott and Stiles, they're driving, they're going to get Kara, and we find out a little more about Damnatio Memoriae, and we see what it means. It was like an old ancient Roman like custom, or like like a practice. That's what it was. It was like a practice they used to do, and the people who were bad or something like that, their names would be damned. So they would go and basically erase them from history. There'd be no text about them. There'd be no name. We wouldn't find. There would be like nothing. No trace of them would ever have like been. And it would happen to like the most vile, most horrible of people. And they would like erase them from history basically, and they kind of think to themselves like, what could this be? And they're like, It's probably a werewolf. I mean, a killer so bad could be a werewolf. And in the same car ride, they talk about Malia and Scott and Styles go back and forth with like if they've talked to her or not. And Malia obviously hasn't talked to Styles. She doesn't want to. Um, I don't know. Personally, I think with where we left off last season, like I could see her point of not wanting to talk to Styles. Like he kind of just like up and like left her like just like whatever. And maybe she feels like a little upset about that still. Or I don't know, maybe it could just be that she's gonna try to kill her mom and she doesn't. She knows Scott and his path don't approve of killing people like that. I don't know. To me, I seen like concern or a little more like Styles is a little bit worried about Malia and he still cares about her. That's what I got from that, or at least I hope I got from that. Scott tells Styles that obviously Malia must have found the desert wolf. He tells her he knows about Brayden, like he smelled like the her motorcycle, like the scent of it or something. So he knows, and he like to tell him he heard like the heartbeat and like the rapid heartbeat and like that she had a lot of aggression and like Styles is like how much aggression. He's like she's gonna kill her mother. So we all knew she was going to, or she wants to. I just thought like that whole scene was like a little nod, like maybe Styles still cares about her, maybe he still wants to be with her. I hope so. Really, really hope so. Then we see Mason and Corey. They have their moment, a rather steamy moment. It's a really cute developing relationship. What I liked about this scene, okay, was that they showed a lot of character development with Mason. I feel like we don't get that a lot. I think a lot of it is more because Liam is a part of the pack. We see more Liam, and whenever Mason's there, it's just like kind of a one-sided thing, and we don't really get to see enough about Mason, which I think he's really funny, and I think there's more to him than what meets the eye. I think he's kind of like the Styles. Him and Styles, I think, are like on the same page where they're not supernatural, so they don't have any powers. They're not a werewolf. They're not like a chimera or anything. They're just regular humans trying to help their best friend survive, and somehow they get mixed up in the whole bit. But this scene, we see that both Corey and Mason have two different ways of seeing things. Mason believes like in doing good and the difference between right and wrong, whereas Corey is thinking, what does it matter as long as I just live? And I think that with a lot of the chimeras, their like judgment's a little bit cloudy. They think more impulsively, like they just want to, like they have like so much pent up aggression and anger that maybe they don't really care. But I like that Mason was like, no, there's good, there's bad, and we have to find like a middle of it, or I don't want to be left alive when I did something horrible to be alive kind of deal. But I like that. That I personally want to see more of Mason. I want to see more character development with him. If they are going to go keep Mason and Liam around longer, I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't. But I heard a story, or I read a couple articles a while back where they were saying that they want to move, like if they do multiple seasons from here on out, they want to move like in a progression where they had Derek, who was the alpha, and then Scott, who was like not his beta, but he was a beta and he was learning. And then Scott becomes the alpha, and then he gets his own beta with Liam, and I heard that they want to maybe move the progression along that Scott would like fade out like Derek, and then they would have Liam become like the new main figure like Scott, and then they're gonna like maybe get him a beta or something like that. So if they do plan on going with that storyline, then I would think that it makes sense that they would leave Liam and Mason in the same area so they can be like maybe like Scott and Styles, as I was saying. Hopefully Tyler Posey don't leave this because he is Teen Wolf for me. Then we see another moment. This was a really great episode. We see another moment where Styles and Scott are at the gas station, and then they talk about basically Scott finally has to hear what his Styles' point of view on what happened that night that Donovan died, because up until this point Scott was like really into the mindset that Styles just like killed just because, or because he hated him because of something about his dad, and he was warped. His mentality was warped because of Theo, and he didn't give Styles a chance to like explain what happened. And this was finally Styles' chance to get to tell him what happened, and he tells him about being in the library, and then that one pin and like that was holding up everything, and he took it out, and then Donovan fell in one of like the planes or something, like he just went through it, and it was more self-defense as opposed to just being cold-blooded murder, as Scott was under the impression of thinking. And I think that, to me, Scott, he was very unfair to Styles. I mean, if it's your best friend, why don't you give your best friend the benefit of the doubt, or at least try to understand what happened? Then we see a little more of Lydia's progression. She's still like in her outer body, and we see that she's walking around. Now let me tell you something. If there's a girl who needs to put some shoes on, because I'm like cringing. I'm just looking like, can you please put some shoes on? Because she's like walking around on glass and on pavement, and it don't matter to her. She's just walking around on everything barefooted, and I'm thinking to myself, like, put some shoes on. Back to the story. So she goes to the library. Her spirit, I'm not sure what part of her goes, but she's at the library, and she looks and she sees where the seniors write their initials, and they're all gone. Maybe signaling that they're gonna die or something. I'm not sure what that's like supposed to mean. But we see a little bit further in, she screams. She screams really loud, and this is like in her like outer body experience kind of thing. And this like comes out so loud that it comes out in her actual body, and like all the nurses hear it and they all rush in and they see, but she's like catatonic on the bed still and not making any movements or anything. They're like, okay, I know, I heard that. Like really freaked out. And then at the end of this episode, we go back to Styles and Scott, and they're going on their way to save Kira. And we see that Kira begins her test. So she's walking out and she's in the desert. Now this scene, oh my god, I rewinded this scene like 2 or 3 times because I had to see it over and over again. So Kara walks and she's like, it starts getting like stormy and dark, and then one of the Oni come out and she starts fighting it, and she takes out her sword and she's like, okay, you know what, I'm not going to be afraid of this, I'm going to use the sword. And once she starts hitting like in the right places, and she's actually like attacking the Oni, everything she does to the Oni is coming back to her. So she slices it, she's getting sliced. She stabs it, she's getting stabbed. So she's feeling all the pain. I don't understand, like, how is she supposed to beat or like win this test or pass the test if it would like initially in my mind kill her if she kills the Oni. I'm not sure how that was going to work. But we see Scott, and he's driving over there, and then they stop and they're looking, and he's like telling Styles that he feels remorse about what happened, and he tells him, I'm reading the quote, says, I know one of us would have gotten into too much blood, says, I know one of us would have gotten too much blood on our hands. I thought it was going to be Malia. And, okay. I thought that was kind of rude. Like, okay, yeah, sure, she's a hothead, but, you know, just assume things. Like, that's pretty messed up. So, that is a interesting part, I thought. Because, you know, he wants to play the blame game. And then we see that he sees Kira, like, he sees her, like, in the distance, and she's fighting and stuff, and he's like, okay, let's go, let's hurry up and go over there. And then we go back to the scene where she's fighting. Oh my god. She and the Oni clash swords, and it's coming down to the last second, and she's like I don't know which one was gonna break. But then all of a sudden, that big old kitsune comes out of her, and it like consumes the Oni. I don't know about you, but that just got me so amazed. I was out of my mind, excited about it. It was amazing. And then we find out that that when she did that, she walks back over there to the skinwalkers, and she's like, I beat it, and they're like, you didn't pass. It was the kitsune who passed, not you. And then it was like, uh-oh, she has to get out of there because she didn't pass the test. Luckily, Scott and Styles get there just in the nick of time. The mom and her managed to get away after fighting. They're about to go like crazy with those skinwalkers, and they're going to fight for their life. They're stuck there. Luckily, Scott and Styles got there though. And then we see, that was like probably my favorite part, one of my favorite parts of this episode. Kara is in the back, and she tells Scott, like, you came back for me. He's like, of course I would. She's like, I love you. And then, I don't know, like, I just thought it was so cute the way her mom was, like, looking back, and she smiles. She's like, that's my girl. Like, you got yourself a good one. I don't know. I really like that episode. I really like that part. I think that this episode was really jam-packed with action and, like, character development. And we see so much going on in this episode that I'm just like, I didn't think it could have gotten better. Another interesting part of this episode was Liam and Mason, and they go, it's at the very end of the episode, and Liam and Mason, they rush up to Scott, and then they're like, I have to tell you something, and they're like, he was like, well, what is it? And he was like, Theo is looking to track down Deucalion. Now, if we go back and we remember Deucalion, the alpha of alphas, basically, he was the alpha of the alpha pack. It was during the time with their fight with the druids, the Darok and all those things. So that was, he's interesting. I like seeing the scenes whenever Deucalion's on it, because I feel like there's a lot to him. But that was pretty cool. I'd like to know your guys' thoughts on this episode. Personally, I really liked it. I can't say enough like how good it was. But the next episode, and that's the last one we're going to talk about, is season 5B, episode 14. I just want to have a moment of silence and to just reflect on how amazing this episode was. I cannot believe, like, this literally, definitely is one of my top, like, 5, 10 favorite episodes of the entire show. This episode is called The Sword and the Spirit, and it's 5B episode 14. And we start out with the Argents in the tunnels, is what I like to call this scene. And Gerard tells Chris about the beast of Gévaudan, and he tells him about like different stories about him, that like just like his form and what he is and what he does and what he believes and what his dad has told him and stuff. Really interesting. And then they split up, and then we see that Gerard, he has a run-in with the Dread Doctors, but Gerard ain't afraid of nobody, and they think they're gonna get the best of him. Oh no. Gerard tells him, I know your frequency, and he's like, I know what you're looking for too. And he goes and like he walks off, like they're like, okay. I don't. I have a love-hate relationship for Gerard. Like I don't like him, but I like him. I think like he's like really interesting. He's kind of funny too. I would say he's a little funny, but I don't know. It's really interesting. I like Gerard. I'd like to know what you guys think about Gerard. If you like him, if you don't. I feel like he's one of those characters. Not much people talk about him. I'm really curious to know what you guys think about him. So please let me know. We also see in this episode, or the same scene around this area time, Chris is walking, and then he's like he hears something, and then he looks down, and he throws a flare, and he sees like a bunch of like missing bodies that are dead, that are being swarmed over with like bugs and all kinds of gross things. Are just, I don't know, it was a nasty scene. Next we go to Malia and Theo, and she agrees to let Theo shoot her up with wolfsbane to knock her unconscious so she can be taken to the Dread Doctor's lair, because she can't obviously know how to get there. I mean, obviously it's in the tunnels. Everything is in the tunnels. That's where everything is at, in the tunnels. Everything is in the tunnels, so I'm assuming that's where the Dread Doctors are at also. And she agrees. She gets knocked out. That's what it is. We see the security are roaming the halls of the school, and Scott and Styles, they're talking to a deputy or somebody like that, and his name was Strauss, Deputy Strauss, I think, and he tells them, he was like, do you guys believe in the supernatural? And then they look at each other like, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't know what you mean. That's a funny episode. I like that this 5B is bringing back a little bit of the humor that the show is so good with, because I feel like this past half season, like they've gone so dark with all of their concepts and their stories and everything, that I feel like we don't see Styles as like quirky and funny as he used to be, and it's not that lighthearted anymore. I get that they've been through things, but still that was the essence of the show, or the essence of Styles' character, that he was light-spirited. I get. Like, even when he was possessed by the Nogitsune, he was still like quirky and funny in a mean way, but he was still funny. Then we see a really interesting scene, and this is where we get the title of the episode, The Sword and the Spirit. Kira's talking with her dad, and they're in the classroom, and her father tells her that at this point she's still stronger than the Kitsune, that she could still gain control over it initially, and he was telling her that the sword is the gateway to the fox, and he goes and he lets go of the, he twists the sword in a weird way, and it just falls into perfect little pieces. I don't know, I thought it was pretty cool. So that's hopeful that she can still overcome this. Then we see back to Malia and Theo, and he takes her to the Dread Doctor's place, and he tells her about the fact that every supernatural being, including the Dread Doctors and were-coyotes and werewolves, they all have a certain frequency to them, and the Dread Doctors know how to find that frequency, be it by the means of some steampunk looking glasses. He twists some little thing on it, and these spikes come out of the bottom that they put on, and then they turn that thing on, and it stabs into their face. Really brutal, really disturbing. I don't like that part. I thought that was interesting, but I don't like the idea of those goggles. And Malia agrees, and she puts them on. She's like, okay, well, I have to do what I have to do. And then you hear her screaming, and she's in agony. And it's no kidding, you literally just put some daggers into your face. And then we see blood come out, and I'm oh no, I don't want to see that. And then we see, and he tells her, she doesn't want to open up her eyes, and he tells her, open up your eyes, and then she opens them up, and she sees where her mom's at, and then she's she sees her mom, and her mom's with Deaton. Deaton's being held captive by her. and then Theo takes off the glasses from her, and then she's like, okay, you know what? She's here in Beacon Hills, Deaton Hills. What am I saying? She's here in Beacon Hills. She's basically saying, and she's like, well, I know I have to find her, and then from there she goes to Liam, and she tells Liam to tell Scott that he was right about the tunnels. And then she leaves, and then Liam, who was supposed to go and tell Scott about the tunnels, did not tell Scott about the tunnels. Okay? Then we see the next part, and we find out that Liam happens to be inside the tunnel. Well, he's walking around in there, lost, but he's walking around in there. And then we see Scott and then Liam, and Liam admits he was lost, and Scott like, yeah, I know you're lost. And then they go on their roundabout, and then Liam finally tells Scott about Malia and her message, telling him that he was right about the tunnels. Then we see Malia and Theo and Brayden, and they go to the abandoned facility that Malia's seen, like in the vision or wherever. She had those goggles on, she's seen. So she's seen where her mom was at, and that's where they're heading out towards. Another cool part about this episode was we see Lydia back in the Icon house, obviously, and Meredith is teaching her how to use her voice, and she's telling her, like, you need to use it like a bullet. You have to learn how to use your voice. And Lydia sees like the vision. She gets a vision of Malia. Malia's hurt, and then she's like, she's gonna die. And when we see the cut to the other scene, and then we see Lydia is like, it's her body that's laying on the bed, whereas Lydia in the other scene is like, she's walking around and stuff because she's having that outer body experience. So she sees, or so we see Styles is holding her hand, and he's telling her, like, you gotta come back to us, we need you. Obviously, you know, we need her, or the pack needs her, we need her. And then Styles, he leaves, the mom asks him to leave, and he does, and you see that he steals one of the employees, their, like, card to, like, get into areas and stuff. We don't see in this episode exactly what he's going to do with that, but it's interesting to know that he has it. We see Scott and Liam again in the tunnels. We also see that they're walking, and then Liam spots out, like, that snake symbol looking like thing that's on the wall, and then they end up turning it, and then they see it's like opens up a passage into the like another area of the tunnels. And once they walk in, unbeknownst to them, Chris Sargent and Gerard were actually already inside that room. And it's funny part of Liam asks, is like, who's the old guy? And Gerard tells him, at the moment they call me a necessary evil, but you could call me Gerard. I like that part, that's funny. And they bring him in, and then they see the picture on, like a mural, and there's a picture on the wall, and then it's of the Beast and of Jevudan versus the Hellhound. Oh my god. It was so crazy. I like got so much chills. I was like, no, my god, really. And then we see them talking, and then they're like, they don't know what they are. Well, obviously, Parrish don't know what he is, but we still have yet to find out who the Beast is. So if he's like either a teenager or something, I don't know what he could be. And we see the first part of Malia versus the Desert Wolf, and when Malia's walking, and her and Brayden and Theo, they're walking up into the facility, and Malia's like, something's wrong. And then she turns the corner, and then they see Deaton, and he's tied up, he's in a chair. And then, out of nowhere, Theo decides, okay, this is the time. And he shoots Malia in the stomach. What a jerk. And then, we find out right then and there that he is working with the Desert Wolf to get him some acrylic nails. I know, crazy, right? So I don't know if they're acrylic, well obviously maybe. So she gives him, the desert wolf gives Theo like a little jar, and it's filled with like blue nails. I don't know what those blue nails, like what they're to, but if you remember season 5A, Parrish, he's called in a disturbance call, and he goes to an abandoned house, and he breaks the wall and stuff, and he breaks the wall, and he finds that one guy, and that guy has like those glowing blue nails. Well, obviously that's what happened. What's in those in that jar. And Malia finally gets to see the desert wolf. And then we cut to another scene. So Parrish is the hellhound, and it's revealed. Gerard and Chris, they go up to him, and they got like a torch, and then they like wave it in his eye, and to see like how much heat he can withstand. And then like the hellhound comes out in him, and then they have a little mirror, and he's like, oh shoot, is that me? Kind of how I feel like when I wake up in the morning. I go in the restroom, and I'm like, oh, that's me. So he sees that he's the hellhound, and they explain to him a little bit about it, and he talks a little bit about when he was in Afghanistan as a soldier, and he finds out that he's the hellhound. So that's interesting. So then we go back, and we see Malia versus the desert wolf, and this is the showdown we've been waiting for. I mean, at least I've been waiting for this. I was just like, oh my god, it's finally happening. So they fight, and they fight like crazy, which I'm really surprised, because Malia is hurt. Like, let's remember that she's shot, but she is still giving it her all. And her mom, the jerk that she is, decides to tell her that, she's like, you don't have a name. I never named you one. She's like, your name is not even Malia. I thought like, hey, don't be a jerk. And then she tells her that Talia Hale, Malia's, I believe that's her aunt, took Malia away from the desert wolf when she was just barely born, and she put her up for adoption, and she ended up wiping Peter Hale's memory of all this out of his mind, so that he wouldn't remember any of these things. And that's apparently why he didn't remember he had a daughter. But apparently with the desert wolf having Malia took half of her powers from her, like part of who she was. And so the desert wolf doesn't have like all the strength and power that she originally had. So she wants it back. She wants all her powers back. So that's why she's trying to kill Malia. She's tried to kill Malia. Didn't work, and didn't work now. We also see that the desert wolf was going in for the kill. She was just right about to kill Malia, and Dean was like, hey, you can't do it. You need a full moon in order for this to work. So obviously we see right there that the desert wolf was using Dean as bait to get Malia to go and find Dean, so that way she could get Malia's powers, or kill her and get her powers. But Dean was the one who essentially knew how she could do it. So we see then a little bit of the purpose why the desert wolf had Dean. We also see, like, and during all this is happening, it cuts to the scene, and we see Meredith, and she's yelling at Lydia. She's like, you have to learn how to use it. And Lydia finally, I took a breath of air, because she finally screamed the way she was supposed to. She used it as a weapon, and it was so loud, and it was like so powerful that she was able to use that scream, and it rattled the place, the facility where the desert wolf and Malia were, and it broke some lights and stuff in there, and it gave enough distraction that the desert wolf was like taken off guard. And came down to, was either Malia gonna kill her mom, or was she gonna save Dean? And Dean was in a bind. As all this was happening, the beast of Jevudan breaks through the facility wall, and he's taking apart that whole wall, and he's pulling Deaton with him. So Melena's like, oh, dang it, what do I do? So she essentially lets her mom go for now, and she goes and she gets Deaton out of that chair, and she saves him. This whole scene, I'm a huge Malia fan. Ever since since she went on the show to now, huge fan of hers, huge fan of Shelly Hennig. So I really was like, this was like the episode for me. I could not like that whole scene. Like it finally happened, and I was like, finally we find some stuff out. She finally has that encounter with her mom. She finally meets her, and she finally is able to like fight, and like she was so close to killing her. I'm not saying like, you gotta go and kill her, but I mean like that's what she's been going for. So like when she finally was getting her shot, oh, she had to choose Deaton. I'm happy she did, but my God, I was just like, wow. Then we see a very important part of this episode. There's a very short part, but very important. Deucalion, okay, Theo's pack got Deucalion. They didn't get him easily, obviously, because they're all beaten up and they're having a hard time. They're all like, oh, laying up on the walls and stuff. But they actually succeeded in capturing Deucalion. Apparently, he's still blind. I mean, and he tells Theo that he knows about the beast of Jevudon, and he knows about the Dread Doctors, and he knows about like what's going on. And Theo needs some help in order to get at the beast, and then he asks Theo for one thing in return for his help. Okay, he says to Theo, "I want his eyes. Give me his eyes." And then Theo looks at him and is like, "Alright." And he goes, "I want the eyes of Scott McCall." I'm just like, oh no, you don't. Please don't want those eyes. I want those eyes. Looking at me. Just kidding. But yeah, shocked me. Oh, so gruesome hearing that. Like, what's he gonna do with them? Like, does he want them like just to have like the eyes? Like, hey, I killed Scott McCall. Or is he like gonna use those eyes? Is there like a way that he could use them? I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much into that. Maybe. Tender moment. We go on. Deaton is at his animal clinic, and Scott walks in. They finally reunite. I'm not gonna lie to you. I shed a little tear because I was just like, he finally found him, and you see there like how much like respect they have for each other, and how much Scott really cared about Deaton. And I really was like, oh, good, Deaton's back. We're gonna get to the bottom of everything. We're gonna get somewhere. And then we see that the end scene, which was a great scene, the pack is back together. And they're all looking over like blueprints of Icon House, and we see them. Oh, like I was just so content with that part, because then they're all there, and then he looks and he says, "Now we have to go get Lydia." Okay, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if that's why Styles stole that card, that ID card, to get into places, so that way he could go and they can actually get Lydia out. Yeah, overall, this episode was just, it was intense, it was insane, it blew me away. I was just blown away. It was so good.